Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga, is now playing in theaters, I think. Welcome back to Cinemaholics. I am John Negroni. Cinemaholics is the Major Motion podcast. And Will Ashton, do you have it in you to make it epic?
I am going to try my absolute best.
So Furiosa, yeah, this movie came out a few weeks ago. We are recording this a while into its release. It came out, premiered at Cannes, May 15th. And it premiered worldwide, on Memorial Day weekend, which was about a month ago or so. I can't keep track of time at this point, but there you go. Will Ashton, May 24th. I found the date. 148 minutes long. Mad Max. Mad Max is a obviously recognizable thing for cinephiles, but as the initial box office for this movie proved, wasn't the humongous like Top Gun Maverick type hit for Memorial Day that Warner Brothers, I think, was expecting. Now, at this point, this movie, which cost about $168 million to make, once again directed by George Miller, who did previous Mad Max films, has so far made $146 million at the box office, so definitely a flop. Bonafide flop. It's going to be losing at least 20 to 30 million, but probably closer to around $100 million for Warner Brothers because of marketing costs. But does it deserve that, Will Ashton? I think that's the question we're going to have to get into. But I guess I got to start with the more obvious question, Will Ashton. I mean, we saw this movie a few weeks ago. We were taking a while to get to it. How did your expectations get met with this movie or not? Like, did you have high expectations coming into this one? Because Fury Road came out before you and I had ever talked to each other, about a year before we met, podcast wise. Mm-hmm. And I know we've talked about Fury Road a few times over the years, but we never had an in-depth conversation.
Oh, I mean, Fury Road, I think there are a few modern action, apocalyptic, whatever you want to call Mad Max films that have really kind of tapped to that level in a way that is pretty astonishing for a delayed fourth entry in a prominent sci-fi action franchise such as that one, considering also that, George Miller was no spring chicken when he made that film. But I mean, that movie is such like a kind of miracle that not only exists and not only that like they finish it and get it into theaters, but that it is as good as it is, and that it is as simplistic but chaotic as it is, in a way that it gets your adrenaline pumping. It just gets you so into this world through so many beautiful shorthands and so much thought and so much details put into those movies. And yeah, I mean, it's rare that we see a fourth installment of a franchise surprise and delight you in that way. And then that's not to say that the, previous Mad Max movies are anything to the stuff at. I mean, obviously The Road Warrior before it, the second one, is one of the great action movies of the 80s, that would be. Yeah. And prior to that, we had the original Mad Max, which is, one of those debuts that, really does announce a director in such a bold and exciting way, and also obviously led to the star power of Mel Gibson, which has become at best maybe a mixed blessing. But all that is to say that the Mad Max films have, I think, earned their canon in cinema history for a good reason. I think the passion that George Miller has infused into these films, the singularity that he has brought with his vision, and the way that he has really defined the kind of like wasteland apocalyptic genre as we know it now is something that is quite astonishing. And considering how great of a critical and award presence that Fury Road got, it made a great deal of sense to pursue Furiosa. But I have been kind of, maybe it's just because my bubble is what it is, but I have been kind of taken aback by the public's kind of disinterest in it in some respect, in the very sense that obviously like the movie's not like the absolute biggest worst flop ever, but like you would think something akin to Fury Road and like continuing that saga and expanding upon the origins of its second biggest character would garner a bigger interest from the public. But yeah, it so far seems it's like, yeah, it's disheartening and disappointing to see it get kind of thrown to the side while something like Bad Boys 4, which I haven't seen and I can't speak to, but it is kind of sad to see that kind of take its fire in a way that I feel it's not as probably deserving as something like Furiosa. But, the public wants what it wants and it doesn't want what it doesn't want. And they're voting with their dollar right now, it seems, and it's not what I wanted, but what can you do?
So I do want to kind of go through George Miller's filmography just to kind of give people a sense of the context, how this movie, how we got to this point. Mad Max was George Miller's first film. Came out in 1979, and it was a surprisingly huge hit. George Miller directed and wrote that film, micro budget, even for the time, $350,000 to $400,000. For context, a movie like Jaws was like $3 million, around that time, just a few years after Jaws came out. But despite that, Mad Max made $100 million domestically. $100 million in 1979. That's a huge hit. The movie was obviously, it just struck a chord. The whole concept of like these gangs have taken over the highway. And, it was obviously a much more stripped down version of the Mad Max Saga as we have today.
Yeah.
George Miller has continuously riffed and expanded upon the continuity and been like, yeah, you don't think too hard about those other movies. We're just going to kind of do our own thing here, please.
It is, because I rewatched the first one earlier this week, and it is kind of funny to go back to that one after watching or rewatching the more recent ones, because it is set in the future and it is kind of anarchic in its own way, but like it's still a functioning society. Like you have a police station and like, people are living in houses and there's like, the news and stuff. Like, yeah, I mean, things are going awry, but like it's not like the wasteland that it would become in the Road Warrior onward. But yeah, it is an amazing feat. And there is a real, I think, sense of danger to a lot of those stunts. I think there is a lot of sense of danger in a lot of these stunts throughout this movie, but especially in that one, like, because it's so small scale and it's like so tightly knit that like when you see somebody, fly off a motorcycle or like get damaged, it's like, is that dude okay? Like, I mean, you just don't know because I mean, like, it's such a small scale. It's like you just hope everyone's making it out okay. But yeah, it is, for whatever shabbiness it might have as a film, as a debut, it is quite astonishing.
Yeah, that first movie, it was always meant to be like, this is near future. And the near future can be dystopian, right? And even if it's quasi dystopian. And the good thing to remember too about that time, 1979, I mean, think about a recent movie like Licorice Pizza, which kind of touched upon fuel shortages and how the sticker shock of oil prices going so high in the late 70s, and that playing such a huge role in the anxieties of people all over the world, definitely in Australia, where these films were made, certainly playing a role into like, well, what happens? Like, society just kind of like would break down if your number one fuel resource becomes unattainable, right? And so like, that's kind of what these movies were built upon in the early goings. Now, that said, Mad Max 2 and Beyond the Thunderdome, the third one, Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, they made way less money. So they made less than half. I mean, they were making like $30 to $36 million in terms of box office. And like the movie started to become more sort of like, especially in the 80s, like I'm gonna go to the video rental store downtown to check this one out. They didn't really have that theatrical, I don't want to say prestige, but that's sort of like, got to go to the theater to see it. It was more sort of like I'll rent this one on VHS, it's there. And then that's kind of where this franchise more or less devolved for a long time. George Miller would go on. He did the Twilight Zone movie, in between Mad Max sequels. He did the Witches of Eastwick, which is more of a cult classic these days, the Jack Nicholson film with Michelle Pfeiffer and Susan Sarandon. And, he does little things here and there, like Lorenzo's Oil was like this kind of like another Susan Sarandon thing that I think I watched with my mother in like the mid 90s,
Shot in Pittsburgh.
He wrote and produced Babe, would go on to direct Babe, Pig in the City. He did 40,000 Years of Dreaming in the late 90s. It was like documentary film. And then he did the Happy Feet movies,
Mhm.
which kind of reinvigorated his career a little bit. That kind of, funny enough, the Dancing Penguin movies of the mid to late 2000s kind of paved the way for, Fury Road, which had been in development for years. It was something that kept getting delayed because of 9/11, because of issues that they were having with filming, of like, the world was so tumultuous in the early 2000s, but there was an appetite to revisit the Mad Max franchise. It wasn't until I think like the early 2010s, like 2012 or so, when they finally were starting to get their feet off the ground and be like, we're going to make this Mad Max movie. It's going to be Fury Road, and it's going to blow people's minds. And it did.
Sure. Yeah. Not to mention also the ongoing issues with Mel Gibson in the 2000s. Back when Mel Gibson was in some way or another attached. I think.
Good point. Yeah, because Passion of the Christ was 2004. Yeah, and then so we were starting to get to like, the real Mel Gibson anti-Semite kind of stuff was happening around this time. I mean, he was still getting stuff off the ground as an actor, but his tarnish in Hollywood was certainly starting to not luster, but I don't know. There's a term for it. Lose its shine, something.
Sure. Yeah. In any case, I mean, obviously a lot of factors were preventative of Fury Road being made. And like I said, it's a miracle that movie did get made, but in the process of that film going through like a 20-year process of development, and this is all detailed in Kyle Buchanan's book that came out a couple years ago, Blood, Sweat, and Chrome, like an oral history of the making of the film. They thought a lot about this film, and they thought a lot about the world, and like a lot of those details I think are streamlined into the film really effectively. You can tell a lot of thought and care and intuition was kind of put into the details of that film, but with all that time spent gestating on the film, a lot of things kind of were made as supplemental material for the film. One of those was a script for Furiosa, which I think initially wasn't planned to be made. I think it was just something that they were doing to kind of justify, like, who is this character? Like, what is her story? Like, what's her deal? And then they were going to make it, I think, an animated spin-off film that was like released around the same time, like kind of similar to how
they had like comics and stuff too. I think that they were trying to do for it.
Yeah, I think it would be kind of similar to like when Watchmen, the Zack Snyder movie, came out, and they did like an animated film with like the comic that's in the Alan
moving
Moore
comic.
story.
They just literally today released like a thing for Watchmen, like a motion web comic animated thing. Yeah,
sure. But this was like a thing, like. Because like they didn't have enough time in the Snyder movie to kind of, because that's a big part of the Alan Moore comic, so like it kind of became its separate thing, and I think that's kind of what they were thinking for a Furiosa film originally, but just fell through, or maybe there wasn't enough interest at the time or whatever. But obviously,
to
when
get
Fury
across
Road,
how long this has been in George Miller's mind, by the way, like there was a certain point where Sigourney Weaver was supposed to be Furiosa. That's the timeline for this stuff.
Sure, I mean, this film had I should say Fury Road had such a long development that, I think George Miller is so focused on, okay, let me just get Fury Road made. And when it well exceeded expectations critically and awards wise, I think commercially it did pretty well, but not amazing. Like, I think it kind of got overshadowed at its box office by like Pitch Perfect 2 or something. But, obviously.
Yeah. It made $380 million worldwide, but because the true expenses of the film, its reported budget was about $150 to $180 million. But there have been reports that the movie itself lost about $40 million on the high end as a net loss, just when all was said and done, and because that's Hollywood math for you. But because it was an expensive movie. I mean, with the things that they had to pull off, the stunts and everything. I mean, it's amazing that they did what they could, honestly, with the money that they had.
Yeah. But you could see, like, because of how endeared this movie was and how much of a triumph it was, that there would be such a great interest for a follow-up or another Mad Max film, especially one centered on Furiosa. But
yeah, I don't want to bury this point. Mad Max Fury Road is one of the greatest action movies ever made. There's a large contingent of people who say, you know what? We're nearly 10 years away from its release. We're getting to the point where people are starting to feel comfortable declaring it as the best action movie ever made, or at least in the conversation of top 5. I'm in the top 5 camp. I think it belongs in top 5 of all time at this point and could only grow from there if you ask me. But I think there's something to that. I mean, I think watching and rewatching this movie, it's undeniable that this movie, there's something about it. Its kinetic energy, its ability to completely surprise and subvert the viewer expectations all throughout while still maintaining just such a strictly adhered to pathos. I mean, it's a movie where I can't imagine not feeling something the entire time you're watching it. So yeah, I mean, of course they made another one. Even if it didn't, they knew it wasn't going to make money. They're like, well, they felt obligated.
Sure. I mean, a lot of factors, I think, it's one of those hindsight things where like you can kind of see both why it didn't do as well as expectations, but also, like you said, why it was undeniable that they would make this movie. Because, like, why wouldn't you want to be in the George Miller business? Why wouldn't you want to be in the Mad Max business after Fury Road? I mean,
it's a brand at this point,
yeah.
Beyond the first 3 films. I mean, it's its own thing now.
But enough with, I think, the preamble. I think it's worth discussing the film proper and what this one's about, how it compares, all that jazz.
Yeah, I mean, it deserved a preamble. I'll tell you that much. Especially because it's hard to talk about Furiosa, obviously. It's almost impossible without really getting the details of Mad Max as a whole. Although, at the same time, I'm of the opinion where if you're going to get into the Mad Max movies, and obviously I think that everyone should watch those original 3 films at some point, I would say that they're not necessary viewing whatsoever to watch these modern movies. You can just watch them. They work on their own. But if you're just looking at Fury Road and Furiosa, I actually think after finishing Furiosa, I was thinking to myself, you know what? Not a bad way to watch these movies to start with Furiosa and then go right to Fury Road. They really do work super well together as a prequel and mainline film, quite honestly. Furiosa, as you can kind of tell from the title, it's Furiosa Mad Max Saga. It's the prequel film that takes us through the life of the Charlize Theron character Furiosa, of course, played by 2 different actors this time. So when she's a child, played by Alyla Browne, I think is her name. And then Anya Taylor-Joy, Alyla Browne, sorry, is the name of the actress who plays Furiosa at a young age. Anya Taylor-Joy plays her as kind of a teenager to an adult. And it's a movie, let's be clear, it's very short on, I don't want to say plot. It's short in terms of, I mean, even just the character dialogue. Furiosa barely talks in this movie. Most of the talking kind of happens with the villain characters, but you're really just kind of like, compared to Fury Road, it's a roller coaster. Fury Road starts and it doesn't stop until the credits. There's always some kind of like build and fall with that movie. It's an extended chase scene over the course of a few days. But Furiosa, true to the name, it's a saga. We're going over the course of about 20 years or so. I forget exactly the timeline, but we're following this character from a young age when she gets abducted from her kind of idyllic paradise within the apocalypse. And she is like having to contend with being essentially fostered by the person who like ruined her life. This guy Dementis, played by Chris Hemsworth. And a lot of the personality of the movie, the villainy, the kind of over the top stuff, it doesn't come from Furiosa, it comes from him. And you're spending most of the movie, like you have your little bit of Fury Road segments of like, all right, now we're going to do like a 20 to 30 minute, action scene that is straight from like, we love Ben-Hur. The chariot scene from Ben-Hur, just Hollywood can't get over it. Why? How could they? We're going to keep that going. But then, of course, like we'll have this huge set piece, but then, we have a lot of downtime in between everything. The main point is that you're trying to understand, like, how do we get to the Furiosa of Fury Road, who is this kind of broken, uber feminist character who just kind of like says so much without saying anything out loud, right? Anya Taylor-Joy, good casting, not great, in my opinion. I think the main problem is that she's not Charlize Theron, and there's nothing they could do about that. But at the same time, it's like Anya Taylor-Joy is so larger than life as an expressive actor and is so recognizable, but at the same time isn't a huge box office draw. It's kind of wild to me. And I'm glad that they cast her because she did a good job and everything. But it's almost kind of like, I feel like it's a missed opportunity that they could have brought somebody unknown in because I don't know. It's not like Taylor. I think they expected Taylor-Joy to bring people in because of like things like Queen's Gambit, right? Of like, oh yeah, people know her from like the Netflix stuff. But that didn't really happen. People are just sort of like, yeah, I recognize her. Sure. Chris Hemsworth was supposed to be the bigger draw, I think.
I mean, you gotta remember, I mean, I think the movie is already in production by this point, but like The Menu was like a huge streaming hit in general. Like, I mean, it was like,
sure, yeah.
Like people, like a lot of people watch that movie way more than I expected, honestly. And that's not to say, for all I know, I mean, with that pedigree in mind, that maybe this will be a bigger hit on streaming. I don't know, but that's kind of a sad thing because I think this is a movie that really does live and breathe on the big screen. So I feel bad for anyone that's deliberately choosing to wait to see it that way. But in any case, yeah, Chris Hemsworth is I think more fascinating to me as an intended box office draw because yeah, he's Australian. Yeah, it is someone who is a marquee name in some respects, but like he hasn't really outside of the Marvel movies really carried a hit. Like, I mean,
yeah, people have liked him in things, but
right.
Yeah, like Ghostbusters 2016 was not a hit. Mm-hmm. And like things like Rush and In the Heart of the Sea. Yeah, I mean, he's just
Men in Black.
You could argue maybe Cabin in the Woods has had a lot of staying power, but it's not because of him. You know what I mean?
I'm not even talking like the films themselves. I'm just saying, like, from a box office standpoint, he is
yes
pretty definitively established that outside of Thor, he is not a draw.
If anything, the only thing he's really shown, like the Extraction movies on Netflix got tons of eyeballs, but like, yeah, that doesn't translate to box office. You know what I mean?
But yeah, I mean, outside of the box offices of it all, I think as far as the performances go, I was really taken by Anya Taylor-Joy here. I thought she gave a kind of like, it's going to sound weird, but like she has like a feral cat quality in this film that I find really fascinating. Like, obviously,
I think she has like animated, like CG Disney princess movie eyes.
Yes. I mean, I think there's something to be said. Like, I don't think she looks exactly like 1-to-1 like Charlize Theron, but if you're talking just like what this movie is and who the character is supposed to be compared to Fury Road, obviously Charlize Theron has a lot more of a like mannered, steely kind of gaze, like someone who's a lot more calculated, a lot more control, a lot more withheld emotionally because of her upbringing and the events that are detailed in this film. But
I think Miller would argue that. He'd be like, well, yeah, Theron is like the person you get after this movie. Right. And he would probably say that was the point.
And I think Anya Taylor-Joy respects that and I think honors that performance, but also gives it something younger and freer and more raw and more emotionally vulnerable in a way that I think is really effective. And yeah, I take no issue with her. And I think she actually is one of the high points of the film. And I thought Chris Hemsworth, you know, I've kind of gone back and forth with him as an actor, but much like him in Bad Times at the El Royale, I thought he was a hoot and a half in this. I thought he was a lot of fun. Yeah.
I like him a lot in this movie. I like this movie. I want to be clear. So Taylor-Joy was chosen, just to put it out. She was chosen after George Miller watched her in Last Night in Soho. So that was 2021. So like it was kind of a 1-2 thing where Queen's Gambit was already out at this point in late 2020. When they were starting to cast everybody. Last Night in Soho was kind of like around when he finally settled on her as being the main character there. So there you go. I think even Edgar Wright kind of vouched for her personally because she was still kind of like, you know, not an unknown. Obviously, she had been things like Emma. She had been in Split and Glass and all that. But, you know, so Anya Taylor-Joy was already kind of like on her career trajectory at this point. But
and The Witch, obviously.
The Witch, yeah, that was like the first thing, wasn't it? I always forget about that movie. I don't know why. It's a good one. But anyway, here we are with Furiosa. And Furiosa, it's a movie that I like this movie. I respect it a lot. I think it's a great time. I think it's a little long, 148 minutes, longer than Fury Road by almost a full half hour. And I think that, you know, there are aspects of this movie where I was kind of thinking to myself, like, I kind of just want to watch Fury Road instead of this, because the thing that you can't really get away from with Furiosa is the fact that it isn't the same as Fury Road. It's not made the same. The level of practical and stunt work, practical effects and stunt work, it's just it's not as unhinged, like, and by design, it's a little bit more scaled back. It's a little bit more like, all right, we're going to use more CG. We're going to use a little bit more, like, we're going to cut some corners in terms of the staging, the production design, so that we can actually afford to do this and the movie itself can actually exist. I don't think that they could have made another Fury Road because of the expenses. And I appreciate that. Like, I understand it. I get it. Fury Road was a swing for the fences. It was a huge risk and it didn't fully pay off in terms of, financially. And I just continue to look at this movie as like, I'm just glad we got it. You know what I mean? It may be a little rough around the edges, but you know what? I think a lot of people can count that to its charm. It's not exactly a movie where you're just like, excuse me, can you be more realistic with fire? I wasn't really like, no, like it's wild. It's insane. It's wacky. The suspension of disbelief isn't that difficult. I think the only thing then, if you're going to come at this movie and you're going to be like, well, what's kind of missing from it? You do start to get into if you're going to make it a saga and you're going to make it all about Furiosa, what makes her tick, could it be a little bit deeper? Could it be a little bit more layered and have moments of, like, I don't know, unexpected plot development? That's the main thing that's missing from this movie for me. There was nothing in this movie where I was watching and I was just like, oh my God, like, I can't believe, because that happened to me all the time in Fury Road. When you're starting to get to know Furiosa and see what happens with her, when you're seeing her and Mad Max kind of get along with each other, and you're seeing like all the other stuff with like, here's what her plan was, here's what happened to her people, and then it all kind of, culminates in this bombastic finale. Like, that stuff is just like, it's insane. Like, it's just so intense. In this movie, it kind of just ends. It's missing a climax, honestly. It has this really good kind of like middle section where it's just like, it does kind of have a Fury Road thing going on where, the main, I think, thrust of the emotion is coming between Anya Taylor-Joy's character, Furiosa, I can't say it, and Tom Burke's character, Praetorian Jack, who I think is kind of this movie's secret weapon. It kind of leaves that hanging, no pun intended, and kind of just moves on from it and then resolves everything very quickly. And I found it very strange. I don't know if you had a similar experience or if it's just me.
Yeah, I mean, it's a complaint that I don't think would be justified for most movies, and I don't even know if it's really fair for this film either, but the fact that it's not Fury Road it's something that does, I unfortunately kind of hold it back. It's just not...
Yeah, it's like, hey, excuse me, you're not one of the greatest action movies of all time. Right. How dare you?
But because it's calling so much to that film, and it's so deliberately referencing it and
you end the movie with scenes from Fury Road, right. Of course I'm gonna be like, well damn, like, that's what I want to watch right now. Which, hey, I guess that's the point.
Yeah, and I think for me, the thing that held the movie back maybe more than the more structured narrative or the length is the kind of prequel-y stuff, like the prequelitis of it. That it's one of those things that, like, it makes me really admire something like Rise of the Planet of the Apes, where that movie has flaws too, but like that movie, I feel like the big issue with a lot of prequels is that, like, it's kind of hard to not like make you feel like, okay, and then this happens, and this happens, because like we know what happens with Furiosa, and it's kind of hard to be like too cutesy with like, oh, here's the organic mechanic, you'll want to know about him later, wink wink, and like, here's Immortan Joe, he's going to be important later on. I think actually with Immortan Joe,
I think the Immortan Joe stuff is a little bit more seamless though, because you kind of have to, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that part I didn't complain about myself.
Sure, yeah. But like, I think there is a thing where it's like, because the narrative of Fury Road is so organically woven and so suspense by second, really, in a way, and like this, where it's just like, okay, and this is when she's gonna adopt the Furiosa persona. Like, this is when her mom dies. Before that, like, here's when she, loses her arm. Here's when she's gonna like shave her head. Like, here's like, it's like a little too, I don't know a way around it, but it's like a little too
kind of tidy.
Yeah, it's like one of those things where it's like, it can't really get out of the way of like what we know is going to happen, which I think is maybe one of the issues why it maybe isn't really taking the box office by storm, is that like people, like, obviously if they love Fury Road, I can understand people being like, well, I know that story, like I know what happened, like I know where Furiosa ends up, like, like, I mean, they may not know Dementis and all this stuff, but like they
Well,
know
pitch is
where
like, hey, more Fury Road. To which people are like, well, I could just watch Fury Road. Like,
but like
I have it. We have it.
Those complaints aside, though, I mean, I really I don't take as much issue with like the CG or the fact that it is a little bit more controlled environments because, like I mentioned before, like knowing that this was at one point going to be animated and stuff like that, I kind of took it as like this is supposed to be kind of more of like a live action cartoon. This is earlier into the apocalypse when things weren't as dead set and as barren and as like bleak as they were in Fury Road. And like obviously it's a younger character and they're going to be a little bit more active and a little bit more energetic and all that. And I think having like someone like Dementis be this kind of like bombastic over the top character kind of adds to that tone and style. So having it be a little bit more CG heavy, I think only amplifies that sort of animated feel to it, which I felt like was a plus, not a hindrance for the film. But I mean, I can see why people, if the main thing you loved about Fury Road was that everything felt so real and organic, even when there was, you know, explicit CG like the sandstorm scene in that movie, like it does all feel a lot more ingrained into the film and a lot more like present in a way that this movie is deliberately a little bit more. You're obviously a little bit more aware of the effects and the CG and all that stuff this time
and
around.
Also the lore stuff. It kind of lays the lore and world building on a little thicker here than it did in Fury Road. But at the same time, I guess my counter is that I don't think any of this stuff that we're talking about has anything to do with why Furiosa didn't perform at the box office. If anything, I think it's mainly because people are aware of the branding and they look at the poster and they're just sort of like, I don't know. I feel like I saw this movie already, and which I guess you're kind of saying as well. But I think also people are looking at this and kind of thinking to themselves like, not the kind of movie that I want to watch right now. I think it was a very specific movie for 2015 that maybe doesn't have the same staying power with like mainstream audiences right now. I think that the kind of movies that they want to watch are just a little different at the moment. I think this kind of like grinding, grueling, apocalyptic thing, I feel like people are sort of like looking at the world and being like, we're already in the apocalypse. Like, I feel like it's just not a movie to go. Like, I feel like people want to go to the movies. They want to feel good. They want to laugh. They're having a good time. They want to watch Barbie. You know what I mean? They want to watch that stuff. They want to watch the Super Mario Brothers movie. They want to watch, you know, or if they're going to watch something that's kind of a little bit darker, they want to watch Dune Part 2 because it's not our world. It's a little bit more sort of fantastical. And so like they can kind of escape. And this movie, you don't escape necessarily. You kind of just sort of like revel in the like the stink of our world a little bit.
It is very wild to say that a Dune adaptation is a safer, more commercial bet than Mad Max, but I get what you're saying.
I know.
I don't disagree. Weird. Right.
It's weird. It's weird.
But no, I mean, I think there is some truth to that. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if it's really worth speculating all that much more on what was the negative here. I always will say that, you know, while it doesn't, I don't think, reach the same level, obviously, as Fury Road or even maybe Road Warrior, there's just so much about this movie on its own terms that there's this pure joy inspiring. And I think really the action scene you're talking about on the war rig with like characters like Piss Boy and like all these, you know, weird contraptions and like these like fly boys are coming in and trying to take over. It's such a marvel of a scene, and seeing that in Dolby in particular is just like, this is what the movies are about. Like, this is just so much fun. This is so well directed, so well crafted, so invigorated, and I think that scene really does live up to the level of something like Fury Road, any of those number of action sequences. I don't think the movie ever is, or no, I shouldn't say ever. I don't think the movie is always on that level, but I think there are several highs in it, and I think, you know, like I said, the attention to detail and the care that George Miller brought to Fury Road is even more maybe extended into this film, and the way that he's even deeper and richer into the lore and unabashed about incorporating that and playing with it and getting weird with it. It is really fun to see a filmmaker play, you know, like with his toys, as it were, on a scale this big. And, you know, I can recognize that like even having a character like Piss Boy in a nearly $200 million project was always going to be something of a gamble, maybe. But I am glad that George Miller got this movie made. It may be the very last Mad Max movie we'll ever get, and that's unfortunate for a number of reasons. But I'll take many more of these than Super Mario Brother movies, I'll say.
We're of a mind. Fran, who I know you're a fan of Fran, gave the movie 4 stars. And she said, the movie is quite good. And having rewatched Fury Road in between my 2 viewings of this movie, does emotionally deepen, though not surpass, the previous film. Mid-movie set piece really is so awesome. Not sure I'll see a cooler 15 minutes in a movie this year. And I think I agree with Fran, quite honestly. Yeah.
Yeah, I can get behind that for sure.
Ella Kemp said, Anya Taylor-Joy acts, or I acts, so EYE acts, like nobody else. Big compliment. Loved the kid, a surprising amount. Chris Hemsworth, funny. I wanted the pace and power of Fury Road, but this is not that movie, and that's on me. Yeah, you know what? We didn't talk about the kid as much, Alyla Browne. She's very good in this. I think that she has the daunting task of having to carry the first chunk of the movie before Anya Taylor-Joy rolls in. I think Browne is in the first, like, it might be like about half the film or close to it, quite honestly.
You're probably right, yeah. And I will say, is it Charlie Fraser? Is that the woman that plays the mom, Furiosa's mom?
I'll double check. I don't know.
Carly, because I know she was most recently. I haven't seen it yet, but she was in Anyone But You as well. She's kind of like an actress model, I believe, on the rise. I thought she was really cool.
I did watch Anyone But You, and
I thought she was
pretty bad.
really
Charlie Fraser. That's it.
Fraser. Yeah, I thought she did a really cool job. I thought she was a very strong, physical presence throughout the film. I thought she, really handled those first opening action scenes and established the tone really well. And she's not in the movie for a whole lot, but I think she does a good job. I mean, I didn't see, like I said, Anyone But You. So this is kind of my introduction to her, and I thought, hey, I'll have to keep an eye on that actress. She seems like a promising one.
Yeah, I think that you're not saying anything too controversial there. Tyler said, never ever mess with a woman during her buzz cut era. I made the joke of like, it's Furiosa, not Furiosa. And when I made that joke, I thought I was very clever. I thought I was being fun and pretentious. Pretentious is right, but I also saw about 20,000 other people make that same joke. So it's unfortunate, but okay.
I'm assuming this is a Harry Potter reference. Yeah.
Yes. It's Furiosa, not Furiosa. James said, sickest damn revenge I've ever seen in a movie. Diabolical. Shout out to that guy at the Cinemark who recognized me. I would say you made my day, but like I watched Furiosa right after. So, okay. I don't think the revenge in this is that good. I don't know. I feel like this movie sets it up. It's like this revenge is going to be like, whoa, like Dementis is going to get it. Not going to give anything away. I found it kind of underwhelming, like extremely underwhelming. And I get it because like the visual stuff of it is sort of like, oh, wow. But I don't know. I feel like it's missing a climax. It's missing kind of like an ingredient to it.
I don't know. I think I gotta disagree with you just because it's hard to really dive into this because it is kind of spoilery. But yeah, I mean, I think what's intriguing to me about it is that it kind of follows a more traditional vigilante sort of narrative. But then once she gets to the villain, there's like this awareness of like, I mean,
it's too late.
You can kill me. You can do, what you want, but like, it's not really going to solve anything.
The damage is done.
Right.
I agree. But I felt like the movie still just didn't fully deliver that, which I think would have been a great gut.
I was kind of feeling that way until the last shot we have with Dementis. And I think that really did solidify it. And I think it made it work for me. Okay. I can see what you mean, but I don't know. I thought it was a lot more thoughtful than your average sort of vigilante sort of thing. And I thought that was really interesting.
I'm not saying it's not thoughtful. I guess it's just I wanted something else. And hey, like Ella said, It's on me, I guess. Brian said, the boys are all here. Scrotus, Toe Jam, Chum Bucket, and of course, Piss Boy. There was like a whole thing where like the actor who plays, I think, Rectus was getting like destroyed on social media because of his character in the movie. And he had to be like, excuse, like, hey, I was acting. Like,
Sure.
Please stop DMing me that I'm a monster. He's like, I'm not this character. It's like, oh my gosh, people need to log off, turn off everyone's Wi-Fi at once. We need it so badly.
I do think it's fun that, because I think when I rewatch Fury Road, I'm pretty sure throughout the movie they say, because his character is in that one as well, like they pronounce it Scrotus. Like it's not Scrotus as it is here.
I thought it was Scrotus, but maybe I heard.
No. What I'm saying is they do call him Scrotus in this one, and they double down on it. Where it's
I see what you're saying.
Scrotus and Rectus. Like, and I think in Fury Road it's like Scrotus. Like it's not. Like there's like a little bit less like assurance. Like, oh, I don't know if we should call him Scrotus, but in this side it's like not only is he Scrotus, but his brother is like it just. I just love how much they double down on that. I think that's just part of the fun. Yeah.
I hope that's the case. Esther said, operates in modes that I did not think a Mad Max movie had the range for. Deliberately pacey, like how action movies in the 70s would spend 45 minutes carefully setting up what everyone's deal is and why everyone cares about what they're doing. Less action figure smashy than Fury Road, though by God, it has its moments, but it makes the eventual cascading climaxes all the sweeter. This is probably not the movie you're expecting. I think I agree with that point. Probably not the movie you're expecting. Like I was watching this and I kind of started to lean in and be like, this wasn't quite the movie I was expecting, but at the same time, I'm happy for that. And I was ready for that. Like I went into the movie knowing that it might just be a different experience. And I think that my mind was preparing myself for. And I think that's a healthy attitude into any movie. If you're like very excited for it and you're ready to dig in, have that like little thing in the back of your head. Yeah, you know what? Maybe it's not going to be what I want. And that's okay too. Just kind of take it as it is. Will's texting. He doesn't care.
I agree with all that. I was nodding in approval. I was like, go off, John, go off.
But he's got to get those texts in. So, you know.
I am so tired.
Well, then, hey,
I'm trying to stay awake. I'm trying to do what I can to stay awake.
The Rotten Tomatoes game. Furiosa and Mad Max Saga has 372 reviews counted as of this recording. Lashin, what do you think the critic score is right now?
I think it's high. I think maybe not as high as something like Fury Road, which I imagine has like 95% or maybe higher or lower. I don't know, but I would be surprised if it was below like a 90%. But I think this one is in a similar vein. I think people, you know, they have to respect the craft. I think they really recognize that Miller is given a luxury here that most filmmakers aren't, and I think he makes the most of it. And I imagine most critics at least will approve of that. So I'm going to say 92%.
Very close, 90%. So slightly lower.
All right.
I think some people are kind of, you know, playing around. They're goofing.
I mean,
what are you going to do?
It just doesn't have the surprise factor of Fury Road, I think. So it's going to work against it in some respects. But
I think there's a little bit of like a tribal sort of like when that Fury Road came out, critics were just sort of like in a line of like, we like it too. I like it more than you do. You know, there's not that going on with this one. So that peer pressure isn't quite there. Who knows?
I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say because like I kind of remember when Fury Road came out, like the response, like obviously it was really strong. And some critics were initially instantly like very much like, this is amazing, this is awesome. But I feel like some other critics were like, yeah, it's good, it's cool. But like it kind of took them through the rest of the year to be like, oh no, that was amazing. Like they're almost like afraid to admit it. I feel like some critics, and I don't know if they'll have a similar trajectory here, but I don't know. I thought I vaguely remember like critics being like maybe a little more sheepish about it than that's
kind of funny actually, because I just went over to the Fury Road Rotten Tomatoes page and it's a 97%. It's lowered over the last few years. There are reviews still being logged on Rotten Tomatoes to this day. One of the more recent ones was from somebody at this website I've never heard of, who this is their excerpt. I have to read it. In a film with such a strong female lead, how could George Miller write such thoroughly forgettable supporting characters? Also, how in the hell is Zoe Kravitz the sole black person in this future Earth? And I'm just like, oh no, this person, oh no. The media literacy, it's not there. They don't have it. Give them a book.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's pretty bad. That's pretty...
They're being progressive.
Yes, this did come out in 2021. So true. I don't know what's going on there. But anyway, we don't have to dogpile on this random stranger.
Yeah, I don't want to do that.
Audience score. We have 1,000+ verified ratings. Will Ashton, what's your best guess?
I'm going to guess it's lower than the critics. It based partially on the box office and also that, I don't know, it doesn't seem like audiences are going to be as taken by this in the same way that I don't know if general audiences are as ravished by the existence of Fury Road as maybe your average cinephile or average moviegoer. So I'm going to say 78%.
78%? Are you sure about that? It's 90%.
Oh, okay, interesting. Okay, so it is.
It's
equal.
An even split. 90-90. You overthought.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess so.
Which happens. I do that all the time. Welcome to my life. Let's go to cinema score. Well, Ashton, what do you think? We have, hey, highest could be A+, lowest could be F. What do you think?
Is it an A-?
Oh, so close, Will Ashton. It's a B+. Same
B+.
as the Garfield movie.
Wow. Well, it came out the same weekend, so I was going to do a B+, but then with that audience score being 90, I was like, okay, maybe I'm underselling it. Yeah.
I threw you off. I have to wonder, too, because since this did come out the same week as the Garfield movie, and Nicholas Hoult voices John Arbuckle in the Garfield movie, I have to wonder if, he was like at the premiere of Garfield and he was just sort of like looking across the street, at the Chinese theater, wherever it was, where Furiosa was premiering, and it premiered at Cannes. But still, he was trying to looking over and just being like, my friends, good luck.
It's like the end of like La La Land.
Yeah.
Like they're this like he's looking at George Miller. George Miller's looking at him. Yeah.
It's like the SpongeBob episode where like SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs are like in different restaurants and they sing the song and they're trying to, it's just a salty spoon. And
I don't know if I saw that one.
It's classic.
Maybe I don't remember it.
Letterboxd is next. So on Letterboxd, we have 449,000 logs on Letterboxd. And can I say, Wash, this movie has made less money, I think, than the Garfield movie worldwide. I'll double check that.
Well, John, I don't know how to tell you this, but I don't think a lot of 6-year-olds are on Letterboxd.
I know, but it's just funny to me. And so this made 146 million. Garfield movie made like 196 million. And yet this movie has like more than 4 times as many logs on Letterboxd because I get it. It's Letterboxd. What are you going to do? But yeah, 449,000 watches. It's not in the Letterboxd top 250 though, so don't get too excited. But Will, what do you think the average rating is for this one?
Is it 4.1?
That's not too far off. 3.9, a little bit lower.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. So before you were kind of underestimating. This time you overestimated. You got caught. You were trying to adjust and adapt.
Yeah.
Who knows? But that'll do it then for Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga, a movie that I'm very happy exists. I'm happy that it came out.
Me too.
And I'm happy that, honestly, Anya Taylor-Joy, I think that, look, this didn't work out as well as I think that she might have, especially with Last Night in Soho.
Yeah.
But she's a great actress. I think that she still has a lot of good stuff ahead of her, I think.
Yeah, she's got a big, bright future ahead of her. I don't think this will hurt her too much in the long run.
She does. I think that, like you said, there was the menu. And I think The Northman was still pretty successful, of which she had a pretty sizable role. And Super Mario Brothers, she was a voice actor in that. Yeah, she's fine. We don't have to worry too much.
Do you think, likewise, how Nicholas Hoult was looking over at the Furiosa premiere? Do you think Anya Taylor-Joy was looking over at Chris Pratt at the Mario premiere?
Yeah. And she was also kind of like looking even further out,
right,
at the cast of the New Mutants who were at like a Waffle House.
Yeah. With those big saucer eyes of hers, she can see all.
She can. She has incredible eyes.
Right.
All right. Well, that'll do it for this week's episode of Cinemaholics. Finishing off with some Anya Taylor-Joy slander. How about it?
Yeah.
Thanks so much for listening. And we will be back soon to talk about more movies. And I was going to say something else, but I don't think I have to.
Ka-chow.
Yeah. Lightning McQueen. There he is. Speeding on by. He would survive all this stuff. That's for sure. From Internet California, I'm John and Gurney.
And for Internet Pennsylvania, I'm Lashin.
See you next time.
Get her done.